President Trump is back at the White House after his surprise visit to U.S. troops in Iraq. Thanked the service members there for their service, but could not resist the urge to wade into politics, blaming Democrats for the government shutdown in front of U.S. troops. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Jimmy Panetta. He is an Afghanistan war veteran and a member of the Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. The president visiting a war zone, you, of course, served overseas, a positive thing, correct?
Of course. And thank you, John, for having me and giving me this opportunity to be here with you.
I appreciate that. It's a low bar.
Yeah.
You can come on anytime. If you're going to be that appreciative, we'll have you on even more. I could use the adulation for that. Now, what did you make of the president's trip overseas? Again, it is something that people felt was long overdue, but he did it, and it is undoubtedly good for a president to visit troops in a war zone.
Of course. I mean, you have to give credit where credit is due, and it was great to see the president actually getting out of the White House, getting out of Mar-a-Lago, and going into a war zone. What you would hope, though, is that this is an opportunity for him to listen, to learn, and not just lecture, and not just have a political rally. But unfortunately, this president, as you heard your last guest on your show, this president is kind of a one-speed president. He only knows one thing, and that's basically holding these types of political rallies. And unfortunately, that's what we saw yesterday there in Iraq.
You did not feel it was appropriate to say what the president did about the government shutdown?
Look, like I said, I think the president, as commander-in-chief, has an obligation when he shows up in a war zone, when he's out talking with our troops. I think he needs to listen to learn. Listen and learn. When I was stationed in Afghanistan back in 07, 08, we did not have anybody as high as the commander-in-chief coming to visit us. But I can tell you, when Admiral Fallon, the CENTCOM, the general came, when the Secretary of Navy came. It's a real shot in the arm, and I think you saw that yesterday. You saw these troops take to the president yesterday. They were excited that he's there. They loved that he was there on the ground with them. And I believe that the president actually felt that, and I guarantee you he'll probably be back in a war zone after this sooner rather than later.
Good. Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope, because I do think it is good for the troops. I also think it's good for any president to see the sacrifices that are made and have been made by the likes of you, sir. I do want to ask about something he said, which was very interesting in terms of policy. He was talking about the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Syria, which he has ordered and which led to the resignation of Defense Secretary James Mattis. And he said he intends to leave U.S. troops in Iraq, and he thinks the troops in Iraq can fill the void left by the U.S. forces in Syria. Operationally, do you think that's optimal?
Yeah, I do not. The key word you used is optimal. No, it's not optimal. Is it possible for them to conduct operations from a neighboring country? The answer is yes. But will it be as successful? And I would say no. And we saw that because early on, the uptick, the success that they had really started to grow once they had troops in Syria actually developing the intelligence necessary to have the type of targeted strikes that those special operators that were there in country actually used. And so I think, sure you have certain assets, aerial assets, SIGINT and so forth that can be used outside of the country. But when it comes to when it comes to developing that raw intelligence, nothing beats having boots in the grounds in the country. And I think we've shown that it can help by the success that we've had in Syria going after ISIS and actually basically isolating them. The problem is ISIS is not over. ISIS is not dead. There are, reports of 20 to 30,000 troops, 20 to 30,000 ISIS fighters, there in Syria, possibly in Iraq. We need to be aware of that. We need to continue this fight, and it helps when we have troops in Syria to do that.
I do want to ask you about one thing the president said there about the mission in Syria, and I think this translates to Afghanistan as well. He said the men and women who serve are entitled to clear objectives and the confidence when those objectives are met that they can come home and be with their families. Do you agree with that sentiment, and
Sure.
do you agree that he is projecting what the objectives are?
Well, look, I think it's obviously the troops, they're there to fight, obviously to succeed per the mission. And obviously the mission for our troops in Syria was to defeat ISIS, but at the same time, it's also doing what John Bolton said, of ensuring that Iran does not become an everlasting presence there and pushing back on that. And that is something that we are basically abdicating when we're taking troops out of Syria to do that. Now, when it comes to Afghanistan, I think it's time that we have a strategy set out. I appreciate the conditions-based strategy, but what are those conditions? As a member of the House Armed Services, we've been waiting to hear that ever since that change in strategy was announced. What conditions are they looking for?
Right.
And we're still waiting to hear that. And if you're sitting there saying, oh, we're going to pull out 7,000, half of the troops that are there, what's the strategy? And that's what I would hope that this administration comes up to Capitol Hill, tells members of the House Armed Services like myself, but also tells the American public. For considering that it's been the longest war in our history, we deserve that. And I hope that this administration understands that, and I hope the president understands that in setting out a long-term strategy for Afghanistan, for Iraq as well.
All right, let's make a deal. Let's solve the government shutdown. Let's do it, the two of us right now. I'm going to come to the table and I'm going to say, we'll accept, if I'm the White House, we'll accept $2 billion for border security, which might include some improvements to the fences and whatnot that are already there. Would you take that as a Democrat?
Look, I think what it comes down to is that when you are talking about border security, inevitably you talk about comprehensive immigration reform. And that's where the conversation should start. It shouldn't start from the bottom up. It should start from the top down, comprehensive immigration reform going down to border security.
That's not where you
yes.
and I both know that's not where it is right now. Right. We've had those discussions in the past. Last February, that all fell apart. In the last administration, they tried and fell apart. The one before that, they tried and fell apart. Where we are right now is we're trying to keep the government open until February. So I'm merely asking is if in the short term you would accept $2 billion in funding for, again, that would include border security and also perhaps some improvements to the fencing.
And my response to that is when we start talking about border security, we need to start talking about immigration reform as well, especially where I come from on the Central Coast of California. That type of immigration reform, saving our dreamers, making sure there is an earned pathway to citizenship is there. But let me tell you, we are concerned with border security as well. But they go hand in hand, and I can't stress that enough. And I believe that if the president came to the table and actually started talking about the elements of border security, and not just talking about a cement wall, but actually talk about the technological aspects of it that are necessary for border security along our 2,000-mile southern border, then we can actually have a conversation. When he starts talking about an earned pathway to citizenship for people who deserve it, be it our dreamers, be it our TPS recipients, then we can actually have a real conversation with this administration about what type of comprehensive immigration reform, what type of security we can get to. And then I think deals can be made. I realize that your pessimism when it comes to those types of discussions, but let me tell you, we have to be optimistic in this job, especially when it comes to immigration reform.
I am an eternal optimist, but also a realist. Congressman Jimmy Panetta, Democrat of California, thank you very much for joining us. Please come back. Appreciate having you on New Day.